Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
Need a powerful and entertaining way to ignite your next conference, retreat, or team building session? My keynotes don't include magic, but they do have the power to help your attendees take a leap forward by putting emotional intelligence into their employee engagement, and customer-centric leadership practices. So bring the infotainment creativity of the Fast Leader Show to your next event, and I'll help your attendees get over the hump now. Go to beyondmorale.com/speaking to learn more. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because the guest that I have on the show today has some great stories to tell that are full of wisdom. Bernie Swain was born in Riverdale, Maryland, but grew up in Arlington, Virginia with his younger brother, John. As a young boy, Bernie could always be found playing baseball on the playground or listening to the New York Yankee games on the radio and cheering on his idol, Mickey Mantle. Inspired by his high school football coach, Bernie planned on a career in college athletics. Despite the fact that no one in his family ever attended college, Bernie earned his undergraduate degree and master's degree from George Washington University. In the last few months of graduate work, he met his lifelong partner, Paula, a special education teacher. When Bernie was 32 years old, he became the assistant athletic director at GW. When the athletic director announced his retirement, Bernie was offered the job. It was his dream job at 36 years old. He far exceeded the goal of that high school boy who may or may not have ever gone to college. Then in 1979, Bernie and Paula's friend Harry Rhodes sent them the note that inspired all three of them to turn their lives upside down. They quit their jobs to start a lecture agency without experience, without a plan, and without a single client. The trio worked from a small supply closet belonging to Chuck Hagel, who would later become the Secretary of Defense. For 18 rocky months, they sat in the closet with their savings running out, unable to compete against the dozens of established agencies up and down the East Coast. Then Bernie got his first exclusive speaker, sealing the deal with a handshake. That handshake became a defining moment for their company as word spread in the small town of Washington, D.C. Bernie Swain is the author of What Made Me Who I Am and the co-founder and chairman of Washington Speakers Bureau, today's foremost authority on the lecture industry. Over the past 35 years, he has represented former presidents, American and world leaders, journalists, authors, business visionaries, and sports legends. Today, Bernie and Paula currently split residence in Nantucket, New York, and Florida. And they have 3 kids, all in New York City, Michael, Tim, and Kelly, and 1 grandchild on the way. Bernie Swain, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
I'm glad you're here. Now, I've given our listeners a little bit about you, but can you tell us what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Well, I've in the mid-1980s, Alex Haley kind of set me on a path to understand the people that I was representing, to look at them not as clients, but as people that I could learn something from, a classroom, for instance. And so I've written a book, and my passion at the moment is getting the word out on that book and sharing it with young people.
So, and I appreciate, I had the opportunity to see you as well as hear you on an interview with Dolph Barron, who's also a guest on the Fast Leader Show, and I think you guys had a really great time together. And I just got so fascinated by your story and how you've actually overcome a lot of the hurdles that so many of us have to overcome, both in an organization as well as building your own organization. I thought you'd be a great guest on the show, so thanks for coming. But when you start talking about who or what made me who I am, for you, I mean, without going through and talking about the entire book, what are some of the things that stand out for you?
Well, as I said, we started our company, as you said earlier, based on handshakes, and it was actually a mistake. All the other lecture agencies at the time were signing people for 1- and 2-year contracts, and Steve came to us because his contract was up. And they hadn't produced for him. So he says, I'll give you guys a chance. And we had been in that stationary closet for 14 months when he came to us. And I was so excited. I went over to Steve's office and shook his hand, came back to the office and tried to justify it to my wife, Paula, and our partner, Harry, by saying, what good would it do to sign somebody to a piece of paper? And that mistake on my part turned out to be a defining moment for us, because Steve went and then told other journalists in Washington, D.C., that if you didn't want to tie yourself up to a written contract, that you could shake hands with this new speakers bureau in town and walk away from them anytime you want. And what that did was establish for us an atmosphere of trust and honesty. And in 1985, Alex Haley came on board with us. And Alex used to sit with me in the office for hours at a time and talk about family relationships. And he used to repeat a phrase to me: when an old person dies, it's like a library burning. And that phrase stuck with me. And as the days and months passed, I began to understand what he was saying to me, that each life, the lives of those that are listening today, and the millions of people that go uncelebrated, is defined by experiences that have volumes to teach us, and that each life is basically a storehouse of wisdom and knowledge, its own library stuffed to the rafters. And I wrote this book for two reasons. One is to share these collections of stories that inspired me for many years about and taught me something about life, the stories of a compelling and eclectic group of my friends who were guided by their powerful influences and the defining moments. And by recounting these stories, to give others a better picture and understanding of their own life and the importance of the turning points in the process.
I thank you for sharing that. And I mean, there's a couple of things that stood out to me as you were talking about that. And also, one of the things that I didn't have the opportunity to share is the background of your parents. I mean, both of them came from, pretty meager means. And even your father went through a lot of, I guess you'd say, issues associated with having a stable home, and grew up in an orphanage, and all of those things kind of culminate into kind of what we are and what we have become. And oftentimes we lose sight of that, because on the Fast Leader Show, oftentimes it's a little bit of an irony I talk about is, the Fast Leader Show is, we talk about doing things faster, but really the way to do things faster is to do them correctly.
Right. It puts us on the right path. We don't go off on tangents and make mistakes and have to recorrect ourselves. So, I mean, sitting down and giving thought to who you are and the events and the people in your lives that have affected you and changed you and, in essence, made you who you are, saves you a lot of time and allows you to make fast decisions.
That's a very good point. So when you talked about, that mistake, you talked about, how it was a defining moment. However, what was the temptation for you to go to that next speaker and try to actually get them under contract and use that piece of paper versus the handshake?
Well, actually, over the years, in 30-some years, we have not yet signed anybody to a written contract. I remember in 1984, I was kind of anxious about having some success, and initial success that you haven't experienced before gives you a lot of temptation to cut corners. And the handshake, nobody in the industry had followed us with handshakes. I mean, we were the only people signing people with handshakes. People could walk away from us anytime they want. We weren't tying them up. I was anxious to cut corners, maybe to raise commissions, to do things to make success come quicker for us. And in the process, at the same time, we were recruiting a football coach from the University of Minnesota who would later go to the University of Notre Dame, named Lou Holtz. And Lou was going to the White House to meet with Ronald Reagan, and we read about it in the paper and sent Lou a letter asking Lou if he'd stop by the office. No one had been able ever to represent Lou. Lou had been independent, and at the same time, he was probably the best sports speaker in the country at the time. So I asked Lou if we could represent him when he came to the office, and he wrote me a letter a month later saying, that he needed to concentrate on football, and that while he appreciated the offer, he turned us down. A month later after that, I get another letter from Lou and says, that I have two inboxes on my desk, and one is for football and one is for speeches. And the inbox for speeches is twice as big as the inbox for football. And if I'm going to be successful in life, I need to concentrate on football. So if you'll allow me, I will love for you to represent me on 3 conditions. And those 3 conditions were, do you care about me? Are you committed to excellence? And can I trust you? And I put that letter on my desk and left it there thinking I was going to file it away. And for some reason, it stayed there for a day and maybe 2 days or 3 days. And finally, it came to me why I couldn't put it away. do you care about me? Can I trust you? Are you committed to excellence? Those were the very reasons I walked away from GW to start something on my own that I had never experienced before, because I wanted to build a company that I was proud of. And I was at a point where I was willing to cut corners and do anything for success. And I suddenly realized there are no shortcuts to success. And that totally changed my life and put us back on the correct path. If I hadn't gotten that letter, if Lou hadn't came and shook hands with us, I would have probably gone the path of other lecture agencies or done something different, or maybe never been as successful as I ended up being.
Well, and so you have to share with me too, because as you're listening to you talk, I started thinking about the whole fast piece, right? And that we kind of hit as they call it, tipping point, or we hit, a point by which exponential, activity starts occurring. So in other words, we have like 10 speakers, 20 speakers, and all of a sudden, boom, we have like 200 that we're representing. So to me, I'm thinking that slow growth actually did help with the acceleration to get to where you are today. Am I wrong in that thinking?
No, you're really right. In 1988, in the fall, we got a letter from the White House asking if we would be one of 30 agencies to interview to represent Ronald Reagan. And the idea was that they would take, and these were not just the big lecture agencies up and down the East Coast, but they're Hollywood agencies because he was from Hollywood. And so the idea was that you would take the 30 agencies, have an interview, whittle it down to 15, another interview down to 7, and they would present the top 2 choices to the president and Mrs. Reagan for them to select it. You heard nothing for 2 months. Nobody knew what was going on. And Washington is a very gossipy town. So if you need to know something, all you have to do is pick up the phone, call somebody, and they can find out what's going on. But there was nothing. Suddenly, in the middle of February, 2.5 months after the last interview, I get a call from Fred Ryan, who's now publisher of the Washington Post, and he was the chief of staff of Ronald Reagan. And I braced myself for the bad news because I kind of envisioned what he was going to say to me. Bernie, you've done a great job. You should be proud of the accomplishments you've done in 9 years. And you did a great job with the interviews, but I hope you understand we have to go with a more experienced agency. And so I picked up the phone, bracing myself for that bad news, and he got right to the point and says, President and Mrs. Reagan have selected you to represent them. I didn't know what to say, so I promised that we would do a good job, told him we'd be in touch soon, and hung up the phone. I remember sitting at my desk that day thinking how totally amazing it was that a president of the United States would select a fledgling agency and a group of totally inexperienced people to represent him and risk his legacy. And I came to understand it after I got to know him, that he was really a small town boy who believed in entrepreneurism and the little guy, and he wanted to give us a chance. It was exactly what years earlier Alex Haley had said to me, that we have to pay attention to the defining moments and the powerful influences in our lives, and that's exactly what Ronald Reagan did. If I hadn't had that slow start, if I hadn't paid attention to the experiences and the lessons that I was being taught by the people I represented, maybe I would have never represented Ronald Reagan. As soon as that took place, we were representing Margaret Thatcher and ended up representing the last 6 prime ministers of Great Britain, 5 secretaries of state, and 3 out of the last 4 presidents.
That's absolutely amazing. So I know now you're sitting here with a whole slew and cadre of all of these folks who have been part of your life, and that obviously you've been part of theirs because you said of the way that you do business, you get to know them and you care about them. So there's, personal interactions that are there. So I can only imagine that there's a whole lot of inspiration that you've received along the way. And one of the things that we look at on the show are quotes to help find inspiration. Is there a quote or two for you that you can share?
Well, Lou Holtz has been a big influence in my life. I mean, I'm still very close to Lou. I just went to his 80th birthday party. So he's made the kind of life he's lived has made a great influence on me. And he gave me a quote years ago that it's not the amount of the load we carry, but how we carry that load. And what he meant was that we all have responsibilities. We all have problems in the life. And if we allow those problems and responsibilities just to stay stagnant and where they are, the load becomes heavy. But if we pay attention to our responsibilities and handle them one at a time, if we face our problems and find solutions for those problems, then the load is easy to carry, and we can carry greater loads, which we end up doing anyway.
Well, that's very true. And I think the whole piece for me about just the movement, don't stay and don't be burdened to the point to where you don't, actually make some type of movement, even if it's backwards. It at least is movement, because eventually you will get moving forward.
Right. I mean, in our business, we the thing you hate the most is that, you schedule somebody to speak at an event, and you may schedule them 4 months in advance. And I remember at one point, Ronald Reagan fell off his horse, and I had 3 speaking engagements for him. And it's the worst thing in the world to call somebody and say, the person you've been depending on can't come, no matter how legitimate that is. And I remember thinking to myself at one time, I had 2 or 3 speakers that at once had to cancel for very legitimate reasons, but I just couldn't bring myself to call the client and tell them right away. And I was in the process of trying to find replacements so I'd have something ready, and I let it build up. And I remember that feeling of letting those problems build up without taking care of them immediately. And it was an experience. I was living what Lou Holtz said not to do. So people say quotes to you all the time, and like Lou said that quote to me, but sometimes you have to experience what that quote means in order to understand it and for it to work for you.
So I can imagine, too, that when we started talking about this, that may be a hump that we have to get over quite often. And we shared one of the humps as far as, starting the Speakers Bureau was concerned. But, is there another hump story that you can tell us that we can actually gain some more wisdom from?
Well, I think the big hump for us was the Ronald Reagan story, because Ronald Reagan ended up, bringing us great legitimacy. I mean, nobody in Washington, D.C. ever thought we would represent Ronald Reagan. And when that happened, I remember the next year, Margaret Thatcher had resigned on Thanksgiving, and it was hard to get a hold of people. And I didn't really know who to call to reach Margaret Thatcher. And I remember getting a call from President Reagan the next day, who said that I just talked to Maggie and she wants you to represent her. And so, that kind of, you just don't know. You build up step at a time when you build something, or in life, it's a step at a time. And then suddenly you find that those steps are building blocks where you've built something that's a solid foundation. And that solid foundation then allows you to build a bigger house on it, or have bigger opportunities in life. And that, I remember that Ronald Reagan was the biggest hump we ever overcame, in addition to the Lou Holtz story, where, it just changed my perspective on life.
So when you start thinking about over the course of the years and where things are going from, a speaker and lecturer perspective, I mean, what do you see some of the things that are most profound in regards to the future and where we're headed? Well,
I think, it's very interesting because, with Donald Trump and what's going on in the country today, it's totally different from the life and the people that I've experienced before. As far as our lecture industry is concerned, I think it's just going to grow. Years ago, they came up with an idea of teleconferencing, so you would then be able to teleconference to an event, and for us, the important thing is for people to be there in person and to touch and allow you to feel the experience that's taking place. So I don't see a great deal of change in our industry. I think it's an industry that's just going to grow, because I think today we want to feel people and to understand people and to experience different experiences more than ever today. I think we can easily get lost in our own ideas of what we want to do and what we want to become, but it's paying attention to other people and learning from other people that's most important.
I think that's a very important point that we all should consider as a takeaway, is that proximity and being able to have that flesh and that feel and all of that is extremely important. So if we're sitting there and we're thinking about, reaching out to somebody and, making, a particular contact, having to have an important conversation, how we go about and the way that we do that, is extremely important. And I've always said, opt for face-to-face and whenever you can get it, and everything else comes way below that. And I think you just validated that for me.
Right. And I think that's what your show does. I mean, your show shares those experiences with other people so that they can take those experiences and use them in their own life. I mean, that's the point of what you do, is that you're giving kind of a guideline, a direction for people to go so that they can make the most of their own life.
I appreciate that. Now, I know, we talked about a grandchild on the way. We talked about, splitting, your residence. We talk about, continuing to work as a chairman on the board of the organization, the Speakers Bureau. But what's one of your goals?
Well, most of the people in the book that I wrote are people that are recognized by people that are my age. I grew up with those people, but young people today starting out in life, don't have the heroes or the examples in life that I had. Most of the heroes today are social media personalities that come and go. And so the difficult thing for me today is what I'm trying to do is to reach out and speak to schools and to classrooms and meet young people to share the experiences in this book, and for them to understand the importance of finding their own turning points and own powerful influences, those turning points in their own life that can make a difference for them. Because I think, today you order something one day and it comes the next day. And things go so quickly that we don't slow down, as we said in our conversation a little earlier. You don't slow down to pay attention to your own life and to learn from it. And I think today young people need heroes and examples to look up to, or examples to better understand the own examples in their own life. It took me, for example, how many people get to a certain age and they lose their parents and they think back, well, gee, if I'd only asked this question, if I'd only known a little bit more, or with their grandparents. And it's the same thing. I mean, wouldn't it be better if we were in our 20s and 30s and we could learn the things that we would have learned when we were 50 and 60 and 70 years old and use those things?
Well, and the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that gives you a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement along with integrated activities that will improve employee engagement and leadership skills in everyone. Using this award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and loyal employees who have great work relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about An Even Better Place to Work, visit beyondmorale.com/better. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Bernie, the Hump Day Hoedown is the part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust, yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Bernie Swain, are you ready to hoe down?
I'll try.
All right. So what do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
Well, I think curiosity is holding me back. I mean, the fact that I have to stay curious about what's going on in life and the world around me and the really important issues of today. And if I stay curious about those issues, then I can stay involved.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
I think it's Lou's advice. It's not the load that breaks you down. It's the way you carry the load. And I think that's very important because, things can get us down and we can lose perspective quickly because we can't handle our own situations.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
Passion. I sat in that stationary closet for 14 months without representing a speaker. Every day I got up excited about a new day, and then I would come home at night facing a lot of adversity because I'd been disappointed that nothing had been accomplished. I was virtually out of money after 14 months. I was not smart. I didn't know what I was doing when I started this lecture agency. So I think it was the passion to accomplish something and a belief in myself.
What do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life? Strategic
thinking. The key to me when we sign well-known speakers and we're competing with other agencies is to think ahead. What's the competition going to say? If I ought to know what somebody is going to say about me or what event's going to take place, so I have an answer to that question before it takes place. And if I think ahead, Tim Russer, when he was alive, was the host of Meet the Press, and Tim would ask one question and then a follow-up question, and his third question, which nobody does today, was what he knew would be the answer to the first and second question, and trying to get a correct answer rather than just giving them understanding what they were trying to say to us. So I think strategic thinking is the key.
What would be one book? And it could be from any genre. And of course, we'll put a link to What Made Me Who I Am on your show notes page. But what would be a book from any genre that you'd recommend?
There's a book by Angela Duckworth called Grit. It's the Power of Passion and Perseverance. And it's a terrific book. It shows that passion is much more important than talent. And I think it's a great book for anybody to read.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Bernie Swain. Okay, Bernie, this is my last Hump Day Hold On question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you've been given the opportunity to take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you, but you can't take everything back. You can only just choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
That's such an easy question because when I started out, I had one single ability and nothing else. You got to remember that I started a Speakers Bureau by reading an article in Fortune magazine where the person where the article was about said, "I don't have any competition." It turned out there was no internet back then, and in that, because there was no internet, I had no way to tell whether he was telling the truth or not. I was 6 months later in starting the Speakers Bureau and discovered, because I got letters from other Speakers Bureaus, that there was 12 other agencies in addition to the Harry Walker agency, which was the subject of this article, and discovered that that I was facing a lot of competition. So passion is the answer to your question. Without the passion, I built on skills because I had the passion to look for those skills and to develop those skills.
Bernie, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
I'm on BernieSwain.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I love to connect with anybody, anytime, and I answer any questions that are ever sent to me. So I'd love to do that.
Bernie Swain, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Woo-hoo! Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.